So as a few of you will already know, I did turn the ripe old age of 50 not that long ago. Now growing older isn't very special indeed, we all do it, and we all do it every day. What is special is being able to hold on to the passion of a hobby for over 40 years. And today, well, I'm going to show you my birthday gift pickups, and let me tell you, there are a few special ones in there. And if you want to see what I got for turning 50, then you just wait until after these. So hello friends and welcome back to Generation Pixel, and yes, it's absolutely true, I have passed the half century mark, and to celebrate, well, I thought I'd do a few videos. This first one, pickups video of course, showing you the birthday gifts that I received for my 50th birthday not that long ago. Now there are a couple of games in there that are very special, well they're certainly very special to me, but let's get cracking with this because the first one is not really that special, but there is a sort of special meaning to it because it's Dissidia Final Fantasy NT. Now I can't really talk too much about Dissidia Final Fantasy NT because I've only played it for about 15 minutes to capture some gameplay for this particular video. Now of course anyone out there who knows me even slightly will know if you put the Final Fantasy name on anything then I'm likely to buy it. Now the thing about Dissidia Final Fantasy NT that would make me not buy this game is it's an arena battler, and at the ripe old age of 50 I don't quite have the reflexes that I did back in the early 90s. So any games that came after that particular era that require frenetic button pushes, well they're just out for me usually anyway. Of course it has the Final Fantasy name plastered on it and you can play as Cloud Strife, who is a character that I believe to be one of the greatest of all time when it comes to video game protagonists. Now for the short amount of time that I did put into Dissidia Final Fantasy, I quite enjoyed what I was playing of it, and it does look like it's quite a deep game. Is it one that I'm going to put massive amounts of time into then? Well probably not, but it's got that Final Fantasy name in it and it's got to come into the collection just for that. So that's Dissidia Final Fantasy NT into the collection, and maybe I'll play it at some point. Next up coming into the collection is a game that is very apt to come into the collection at this time. It's a game that I wanted when it was launched not that long ago, but held off because I knew someone wanted to get it for my birthday, and that game is, well it's more than one game because it's Atari 50. Now of course there's a myriad ways to play Atari games on modern consoles these days. Atari haven't been shy in pumping out many of these compilations on every system that came out prior to Atari's downfall. And yes, I do have several of these compilations that I can play on many different systems, and yes, an Atari 2600 Junior that I can play original software, original hardware on a CRT when I take the notion. But what really grasps me about the Atari 50 disc that I have here in my hand is the depth of information that comes along with it. It's not just a compilation of various games over the years, going all the way back from the arcade games right up to the Jaguar. It also has some wonderful little snippets of documentaries and information that will keep the avid gamer happy for hours. And as much as I will play a few of the games that come on this particular compilation, especially the Jaguar games because that's a system I have no real experience with, I really did get this for not only the nostalgia value but for the information that came along with it. So that's the Atari 50 collection into the collection, and I'm very happy that it's in there indeed. Next up, coming into the collection, we're moving away from the PlayStation 4 and onto a completely different system whatsoever. Well, not completely different, it's still a Sony system because I'm still a Sony pony and people know that when they're buying me gifts. But the gift that this person bought me was a game that maybe 3 or 4 years ago I wouldn't have looked twice at. But something happened in 2021 when I played a little game by the name of Persona 5 and it completely changed my outlook on a whole series of games. So gifted to me for my 50th was Persona 4 Golden. Now I can't talk too much about Persona 4 Golden at the moment because I've only just started playing it. But for the hour or two that I have been playing it, it's exactly what I'd hoped it would be. As I said, I wouldn't have looked at the Persona games a few years ago despite being a massive JRPG fan. But when Persona 5 went on the PlayStation 5 collection, I thought why not at least give it a bash. And well, the rest is history because I've pumped almost 300 hours into Persona 5 alone. The beauty with Persona 4 Golden, however, it's a Vita game so I can take this on the go. No more boring commutes for me because I will have this to keep me company for countless hours, no doubt. Very happy to get Persona 4 Golden into the collection, and that's where it's going to stay forever. Next up, we're staying with Sony because that's what people know I love, and that's not a bad thing. But we are moving down to the bottom of the generations when it comes to Sony. We're talking about the PlayStation, and the games that are on this particular disc, because there's more than one, well, they go back even further because it's Arcade's greatest hits. The Atari collection too. Now, I've said this before and I will say it again, a compilation disc is something that I completely adore. And yes, there maybe have been some sort of tie-in with the Atari 50 collection that was gifted to me, but that's not a bad thing either because I did grow up with the arcades being as old as I am. And on this particular compilation you have some absolutely stunning games. You have Road Blasters, Crystal Castles, Millipede, Marble Madness, Gauntlet and the almighty Paperboy. Now, these games of course I can play on other systems, but when it comes to the Sony collection, if you're going to get me a compilation, you're onto an absolute winner there, especially when it's one that goes all the way back to the arcade days. And I do have a few of these compilation and arcade compilation discs on various systems, but this one here is absolutely top notch when it comes to the content that's on it. So I'm really happy to have Arcade's greatest hits, the Atari collection 2, into the collection where not only will it stay, but it will get played on a regular basis. Now, those previous games were wonderful games indeed, and games that I did want into the collection for one reason or another, whether it being the Final Fantasy name just dragging me in and saying I've got to buy them all, pretty much like Pokemon, or the fact that they're classic arcade games, things that I absolutely adore. But the next two games coming up, we're still staying with the Sony PlayStation, and these are Holy Grail games. Well, they're Holy Grail games for me. Now, I don't know how you consider a Holy Grail, but for me it's a game that you must have in your collection, and one that's not always easy to get hold of, or maybe even a little bit on the pricey side. And the first of those games, the first of those Holy Grail games that came to me on my birthday, and I will say thanks to my better half who done a splendid job when she stepped up to the plate because she knocked it out of the park, was Suikoden. Now, Suikoden, I've talked about Suikoden on the channel a few times because this is one of my favourite game series and this is one of my favourite games. It was only the second JRPG that I'd properly ever played, only the third in total if you include the fact that I used to watch a friend play Phantasy Star back in the 1980s without really understanding what was going on. But this was the second one, the one after Final Fantasy VII, and I absolutely fell in love with the 16-bit pixel art graphics. And on top of that, the whole range of characters that you get to collect as playable characters throughout the game, and the rich world that you're living in, and the deep history, and this game just goes on and gives you everything. Well, just about everything that you could want from a JRPG. So Suikoden back into the collection after, well, having it twice before and getting rid of it. Once I loaned it out and it never came back, and once I sold it mistakenly, because we all make those mistakes. But Suikoden is back into the collection where it will stay forever. Now, next up is another Holy Grail game, and we are staying with the PlayStation, and we are staying with Suikoden because it's Suikoden 2. Now, Suikoden 2, I've talked about this game probably as much or almost as much as Final Fantasy VII, because in my humble opinion, Final Fantasy VII and Suikoden 2 are the two greatest games ever made, and forever in my head they're having a battle to see which one should be number one. Now, Suikoden 2 is very similar to Suikoden in many ways except for one, and that being Suikoden 2 was a game that the developers were looking to build in Suikoden 1, but just maybe didn't have the time, money or experience to do it. We've seen this time and time again in video game history. Take a look at the Assassin's Creed games. The first Assassin's Creed feels mostly like a tech demo if you play it these days, whereas Assassin's Creed 2 is a fantastic, almost masterpiece of a game. And for me, this is what Suikoden 2 is. The developers knew what they wanted to do in Suikoden, but just didn't have the resources to push it over the line to perfection, and that's exactly what they managed to do with Suikoden 2. Now, that being said, like the Assassin's Creed game, games it wasn't an absolute remaster with added on bits to the game when it came to Suikoden 2. It has a whole new story, a whole new protagonist, and a whole new host of characters that you can recruit into your own army. It does have a lot of the classic characters from the first game, of course, which makes it that extra bit special, but there's just so much more depth to Suikoden 2 than there is Suikoden 1. Now don't get me wrong, Suikoden, the first game, is absolutely fantastic, and if you haven't played it, then you need to go and play it. And Suikoden 2, well, if you haven't got Suikoden 1 and you've got 2, you can still just play this standalone. Now there is a nice little Easter egg, shall we call it. If you play 1, have your save file and then go on to play 2, depending on how well you played the first game, but you don't have to. You can play either of these games as independent games, and yes, Suikoden 2 is an absolute masterpiece, and I am absolutely ecstatic to have this back into the collection. So there you go, my friends, that was my 50th birthday gifts, and I think I done quite well for my birthday this year, especially when it came to Suikoden and Suikoden 2. I will absolutely love diving into that Atari 50 collection PlayStation 4 game, because not so much for the games, although I will play them when I boot that disc up. It's looking over the history, because the Atari was the very first console, a proper console that I got my hands on back in the day. I did play a Pong clone back in 1977, and of course I played on arcade cabs, but the first proper home console, the Atari 2600, well, that was the first one I got my hands on, and I do have a lot of nostalgia for it, despite not taking that path myself. And if you know me, you'll know that was the root of the microcomputer and the mighty ZX Spectrum. Now if you want to talk about any of the games that you've seen here today, drop that down in the comments, because the interaction between you and me, that's what makes YouTube special. This channel and me, we're here for the community, to talk to you, you to talk to me, and let's just have fun with video games. Now if you want to see some of my history of video games, then up here in this corner here, yep, that one there, there's the pixel years. And down there, if you want to see pickups, you know what, I'll throw some pickups down there, even though Super Nintendo won't touch them with a barge pole. Thank you very much for watching as always, and until next time, cheerio!